Hello, I'm happy you're here. Welcome to the bracket. Welcome to finding out what my book of the year is. And to do this, I'm going to take my favorite book from every month and set them up into a bracket style competition. So because I only pick from each month, there are some favorite books from this past year that are not on this list because they were just read with another favorite book. So this is in no way my top 12 books of the year, which is wild to think, but this is just every book that was my favorite from that month. I also don't think that I am going to particularly judge all of these books by the star rating that I gave them. We could end up that a 4-star book beats out a 5-star book. We don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to use for criteria going into this yet. I'm just going to go off of vibes. So because there are 12 books throughout the year, we are going to give vibes to the books at the front half of the year. So we're going to use the ranking of the months to be the ranking for the bracket. So the first 4 months get a bye. And I think that this is pretty fair because recency bias could help sway towards a more recently read book for the later half of the year. So this gives our first 4 months of the year a little bit of a head start. I think it's pretty fair just because, again, recency bias can be a real thing. So let's go through all of the books. I don't have the authors' names right off the top of my head, so I am going to apologize for that. So in January, the book of the month was Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I did have grand plans at the beginning of the year that I was going to buy all of my favorite books of the month, but I kind of altered that. I don't buy a lot of physical copy books. I did, however, manage to get a copy of Funny Story. In February, I read Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and this was probably the biggest book I've read to date. This was an epic fantasy that really took me a couple weeks to really get my grips into, but I had been staring at this book for a while. I will be reading more books of this series, but that was my top read in February. In March, I read Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinneman, and if you've been here for a while, I'm now going into the 5th book for Dungeon Crawler Carl. Well, I will be at some point in 2026, and I'm planning to finish the series in 2026. Fingers crossed we get to there. And then we have Heartless Hunter by Kristen Kirkarelli is my 4 spot because it was my favorite read in April. I have not yet gotten to Rebel Witch. It is on my list, and hopefully we will be reading that in 2026 as well. Then in May, bringing in our 5th spot is The Danish Secret to Happy Kids by Helen Russell. This is the only nonfiction book to make it for book of the month and now be entered into this, the book of the year. It was just a fun read, interesting to peek behind the curtain about other people raising their kids in other locations and different and it really challenged some of my thoughts about raising kids here as I am. And then Emily Henry gets another spot in the 6th spot for Great Big Beautiful Life. I read this in June. I loved it. It took me about 2 days, but I was in a race against my library deadline. I had been waiting for the book for a couple months, and then I almost ran out of time when I had the book in my possession, and I was not about to let the chance slip through my fingers, so I ended up binge reading it, and I just had a wonderful time. I really do enjoy Emily Henry. 2025 was my Emily Henry year. I ended up reading all 6 of her contemporary romances this past year. Then our 7th spot, our July read, was Welcome to Fae Cafe by Jennifer Kropf. And I just had a silly goofy time. This book did not take itself too seriously. I loved the premise of, oh hi, Fae King in our just regular daily lives being thwarted by a human accidentally. And it was fun. It was silly. It wasn't too serious. It's got more books that I would like to take a look at, but they're just not really high up on my list. But I did just have a silly goofy time with this book, and it was what I needed at that time. And then what do we got for number 8? Oh, our 8th slot, August read, was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This was my most anticipated read of 2026. And in August, I had also read Atmosphere. So this is one of those moments where I was going back and forth between the two. Thinking about it when I was building out this bracket, I thought I had picked Atmosphere. I had to go back to my video to figure out which one I picked, and I surprised myself that I picked The Night and the Moth. I guess like little retrospect with the months between August and now, I guess I would rank Atmosphere above The Night and the Moth as far as experience goes, which was crazy. I rated them the same. So that's our August pick. Let me know if you want me to rank all of the books I've read in 2025, because again, this is not all of my favorite books of the year. And then in September, I read Beta Vulgaris by Margie Sarsfield, and I had such a surprisingly good time with this. It is the only horror book on this read. I don't do a lot of horror reading, but this one really made me think and made me more interested in the fantastical elements of horror. And I think that this book is really what proved to me that I am more interested in horror over thriller if I had to pick between those two particular genres. And I just really enjoyed the messaging. It overtook my thoughts a lot after I'd read it. October, we have Beartown by Friedrich Bachmann, and oh my gosh, this book tore me apart. I did this as a buddy read, so it also has this extra layer of I read it with friends at the same time and we're able to talk about the book in real time, which is why I would love a book club. I need a book club. Should we have a book club? I adored this book. Small town, big incident. I feel like I've talked about this book enough on this channel. I don't want to go too deeply into it, but very devastating, very beautifully written, very poignant. And yeah, I had a really great time with this book. And then number 11, we have Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and it was just a silly, goofy time. I love the concept. I love the whimsy. I think this is probably the most whimsical book between this and Welcome to the Fae Cafe. I think that it just didn't take itself too seriously, but it was very sweet, very nice, found family, not feeling stuck in your same roles and accepting yourself as a different version. And I had a fun time with it. And then finally, our 12th spot, Friedrich Bachmann again. This is the second book in the Beartown. It's Us Against You. It's book number 2. Book number 2 of the Beartown series. Absolutely devastating. Again, beautifully written and just stuck with me. I've got The Winners, which is the third book in the series, downstairs waiting to be cracked open, but it's a big one, so I'm a little frightened. But let's just roll on down through this bracket. I'm so nervous to make decisions. I'm trying not to stare at this too much before this exact moment. All right, we've got our first lineup here. We've got The Night and the Moth and Beta Vulgaris. I think that as far as ratings go, The Night and the Moth I definitely rated higher, but Beta Vulgaris again just kind of told me more about what I can like about horror, which I've never had a book do that for the horror genre before. The Night and the Moth, my most anticipated read of the year. I was really looking forward to it, and it didn't disappoint. I did really like it. It made me have to think a lot. Again, I'm trying not to base this completely off of ratings, but also the mood I was in, my expectations going into it, what I got out of it. And because of that, is this crazy? I'm gonna move Beta Vulgaris over. I did not think that that was going to happen. Okay. All right. Okay. This is what we're doing. Our May read versus our December read. The Danish Secret to Happy Kids versus Us Against You. Our only nonfiction book against the second book of the Beartown series. I did love Us Against You. As far as experiences go and headspaces go, I was able to read Us Against You with a friend at the same time, so that was nice. The Danish Secret to Happy Kids was giving me a new insight. It's not like a step-by-step like how to raise your kids different. It's just these are the mindsets here, and maybe you'd be interested in that. I binged Us Against You in about 3 days, and I listened to The Danish Secret to Happy Kids on audiobook. 2 very, very different reading experiences. My gut reaction to just experience overall and gaining, I think I'm gonna go with The Danish Secret to Happy Kids, even though Us Against You is absolutely gorgeous. Hold on, my children are talking to me. All right, The Danish Secret to Happy Kids is going on. I love the Beartown series. That is definitely going to be a series I am going to be purchasing to have on my shelves, but I think just experience and The Danish Secret to Happy Kids like lifted me. Not that needing to be lifted is always the case. All right, our July read versus our October read. Welcome to the Fae Cafe versus Beartown. Again, silly goofy time. I love a book that doesn't take it too seriously. It took some tropes and just made it silly. I loved that. Beartown just, it had so many quotes in it that if I did own that copy of the book, I would have highlighted and tabbed. I loved so many quotes out of Beartown, and I've gone on about it enough. I don't think it's much of a surprise that I'm sending Beartown on. Okay, June versus November. Great Big Beautiful Life versus Legends and Lattes. Again, very different reading experiences. Both I binged pretty quickly. Great Big Beautiful Life was on the time crunch, and then Legends and Lattes was an audiobook that I just managed to get a lot of driving in during that stretch of time, so I got to listen to it a lot. Very cute, like little voices was done for Legends and Lattes. Great Big Beautiful Life. I love the aspects of the story, the sort of mystery about it, and the underlying love story. These two are feeling very even to me as far as the experience itself goes. One was very leisure, but just lucky enough to get in the time to listen. The other one was on like a time crunch. I think both of them had very lovely qualities. They both made me feel something, but I think I'm gonna go Legends and Lattes, moving that on. I loved Great Big Beautiful Life. Again, another 4.75. Probably should have just rounded it up to a 5. Legends and Lattes was like a 3 point something. I just think looking back on my experience of it and more like just reflecting, yeah, I gave it a 3.75, a whole star less than Great Big Beautiful Life as far as like the writing goes and the story goes, but the experience wise for me, I think Legends and Lattes takes it. What an upset. Again, would not have picked that. Okay, now we have Beta Vulgaris moving on against Funny Story. Funny Story was the first Emily Henry book I read. I listened to it. I love this love story. I think out of all of the Emily Henry contemporary romances, again, I read them all this year, I think this one had my favorite couple. Daphne and Miles, I think, were my favorite in the 6 contemporary romances I read by Emily Henry. I had a great time. It had like such a great entrance to it. I want to say when I was picking the book of the month for January, there's spat everywhere, I was going back and forth between Funny Story and Night of the Living Rez. Again, an amazing book that's not on the list because of a split decision kind of like I'm making now. I need to do a wrap up of my top books or just ranking every fiction book I read this year or something. Feelings, vibes, I think longevity of staying with me. I think Beta Vulgaris will have more of that long-lasting impact. Funny Story I would love to read, like reread in physical form because I did get a copy of the book. But I think for the sake of this, I'm gonna move Beta Vulgaris ahead. Again, I don't know if that's like recency bias because I read that in September versus January, but I don't know. Something about that book just hit me. April read versus May read, so read very close together. Heartless Hunter versus The Danish Secret to Happy Kids. I was going into Heartless Hunter because this is around when Rebel Witch came out and everyone was talking about Rebel Witch, so I read Heartless Hunter to see what it was all about, and I really did love the story. I loved the magic in it. I thought that it was such a good magic system, a very thought out magic system, and there's a lot of political stuff going on. There's this enemies to lovers, like not so much enemies to lovers, but more like being in bed with the enemy, like sort of stuff going on. And I'm looking forward to the second one. I don't know why I have drug my feet so hard before reading it, because I've heard such great things and had a really good time with the first one. I think I'm gonna go with Heartless Hunter. Moving ahead, Over the Danish Secret to Happy Kids. Okay, Priory of the Orange Tree versus Beartown. Oh my gosh. Oh, this one feels so hard. Priory of the Orange Tree was the first one where I really sat down and tried really hard to piece together everything that's going on in a book like this. It's high fantasy, it's sapphic, it's matriarchal, it's so good but very intimidating. But because it was so long, it's really made me feel intimidated by picking up the second book. It's been almost a year since I read Priory of the Orange Tree, where with Beartown I started reading the second book right away. I don't know if size plays into it, because again, I'm kind of putting off the third book in Beartown because of its size, which maybe that's just a me. I need to just get over it and figure it out. Priory of the Orange Tree, just like Beartown, had a lot of different characters that you're following and a lot of different plots you had to keep track of. But because the Priory of the Orange Tree has all of these interwoven connections spread out over an entire world, it was a little bit harder for me to piece together the overall vibe between everyone, where with Beartown you're still getting all of these multiple perspectives, but because they are all so close, they all live in the same town with like kind of this one focal point around hockey, it was a little bit easier to keep track of. I can't remember my emotional state of reading Priory of the Orange Tree, but I know my emotional state when reading Beartown. And if I were to tell someone to read a book, I think it would be Beartown. Alright, March read Dungeon Crawler Carl versus November's Legends and Lattes. Dungeon Crawler Carl is different than anything I've ever read. I felt much more, even though I was still adjusting to the language in the first book, because now I've read 4 of them, I understand it a little bit more. But even then, the first one was so compelling and a bit easier to digest than these ones a little later on, because now with these later on ones, there's a lot more involved and a lot more other things, not just the language of RPG going on. But I had such a fun time with Dungeon Crawler Carl, and also a fun time with Legends and Lattes. But I am so much more interested in continuing on the series of Dungeon Crawler Carl more than I am Legends and Lattes. Like, I know there's 1 or 2 books after Legends and Lattes, but that's going to be for when I am looking for a book to listen to, and I don't think that I would seek it out where I am actively looking for a hardcover version of Dungeon Crawler Carl to add to my collection. Like, I am really loving this series. I also think the books are gorgeous, and I would love to have this book in my collection. So let's move Dungeon Crawler Carl on. Oh my gosh, we're getting down there. Last 4, final 4. Beta Vulgaris versus Heartless Hunter. A standalone versus the first book in a duology. Horror versus romantasy-esque. I would probably put it as fantasy over a romantasy. I don't know. This one, I was not expecting these two, I guess, to be in the semifinal. If you were to ask me about this, I don't know, a week ago, even though every time I see the collage picture I made for my post, I'm like, oh, I love these books. I love all these books. Beta Vulgaris made me really think. Heartless Hunter made me kind of like giddy and enthralled, and like that like sit up, like what's gonna happen, the suspense of it. Beta Vulgaris made me like internally think of like my own brain and my own thinking and my own relationship to my body, my thoughts, like very different experiences. If Heartless Hunter was that compelling, would I have already read Rebel Witch? However, what I know about me is when I love something, I find it really hard to finish it because I don't want it to be over. There are a lot of duologies I have not finished because I love it and I'm scared of the ending. I'm scared of the ending and I don't want it to be over. And I feel like that's kind of what Heartless Hunter gives me. Beta Vulgaris I feel like I would read again if I had my own copy and highlight and tab. Heartless Hunter I think would be a nice reread, but it would also be a book I would suggest to friends to read more so maybe than Beta Vulgaris, because I think Beta Vulgaris really needs a certain type of trauma. Ooh, I thought my eye keeps going to Heartless Hunter. That was really hard. I'm realizing how much I love Beta Vulgaris, and I think I'm gonna need a copy for my shelf. I think probably most of these books I should have a copy of. Beartown versus Dungeon Crawler Carl. Could we have a more different situation? Both very tense. Both have a lot going on. One, I've never read anything like it, like I said, Dungeon Crawler Carl. Beartown. God, these characters. I love them, I hate them, I hate to love them, I love to hate them. Dungeon Crawler Carl, love Donut. Kind of confused about what's going on. Now I'm like adding in their sequels. I don't know if that's fair. Experience-wise, I needed a silly goofy time. I found a silly goofy time. Beartown, got to read with friends, got to commiserate with friends, thought about it so much. Is it a recency bias that we're going October versus March? Those are pretty far apart. Both written really well. Both I want for my shelf. One a lit fic, RPG, fic, fantasy. My gosh, what an eclectic group we have here at the end. My heart, we're gonna have to go to my heart. My heart says Beartown. My heart says Beartown. So I don't think that it's much of a surprise, even though I've had some books coming through here that I am surprised where they went and who they beat. But it's gotta be Beartown. It's gotta be Beartown with a second place to Heartless Hunter. Congratulations, Heartless Hunter, for your runner-up place. Beartown, you were the favorite going in. I expected it. We had a little bit of a thought at Priory. And also Dungeon Crawler Carl. What a great year for reading, actually. When I'm looking at this, and this is just not even my 12 top books, because there are other books. If we go into Storygraph real quick here, I can go into my stats for 2025. And then we go down to my rated books. Anything I think favorite wise would be anywhere from a 4 to a 5. Even though like Legends and Lattes was living here. And I also think the Danish Secrets also lives in there. There's some good books in this 3.75 spot. And when push comes to shove, these are usually the books that get rounded up to a 4. But we've got 16 books in 4 stars. We've got 4 books in 4.25, 4 here. We've got 3 in the 4.75 and 3 straight 5 stars. So 16, 17, 19, 20, 24, 30. So we've got 30 top books here. And again, these books would probably be bumped up to a 4 at a push. So 48 decent good reads. And look, the Spell Shop was not even on there because I read that at in the same month as Beartown. So these are the 3 straight up 5-star books I gave. Beartown, The Priory of the Orange Tree, and The Spell Shop. And The Spell Shop didn't even make it into that bracket. So think of the rankings we could do, guys. We just saw retrospectively what just happened with Beta Vulgaris. Again, I don't even know what I rated that originally. A 4, a straight 4. 16 books at a 4-star. Oh, The Last Blood Carver. Such a great series, both of those books. Just last night, I don't remember giving Phantasma a 4. I guess I did. Girl in Translations a 4. I think all of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books are above a 4. Six of Crows I liked. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. A Botanical Daughter. Malibu Rising. Oh, I forgot I read that in 2025. Carrie Soto is back. A lot of Taylor Jenkins Reid books. Heart and Thunder. The Glamorist. That was the last Sarah J. Maas book I read. Silly Goofy Time. Atmosphere. Oh my gosh, Atmosphere. So with all of that being said, you've got to let me know, do you want to see these books more fleshed out? Do you want to just see them all together? Maybe just my 4 and aboves, my 3.75s and aboves, fantasy onlys by genre. Let me know what you want to see. That was fun. I am glad we did the bracket. Here's to Beartown. Tell me what your favorite book of the year was for 2025. And I'll see you in the next one.